Few artists have had the musical trajectory of Scott Walker. Born Noel Scott Engel on January 9, 1943, the Ohio native singer moved to California with his mother in 1959. Embracing the teen idol image in the early stage of his career, Walker spent a few years dabbling in various musical and theatrical performances while carving a distinct creative taste for the arts. In 1961, he played bass guitar for a band called The Routers, which eventually led him to meet John Mouse. Mouse's stage name, at the time, was John Walker, a moniker that carried on to the duo's claim to widespread fame in the United Kingdom following the formation of the Walker Brothers. The three members of the band, Scott, John, and Gary, all sported the name, despite none of them being actually named Walker or sharing any family. The trio quickly cultivated a traditional pop sound, achieving success on the UK charts. It's apt to draw comparisons with the Beatles here. The sound signified the transition of a boy band image, where upbeat tracks and musings of love take precedence until they eventually fade into offbeat abstraction. In addition to achieving more success overseas than at home, all of the bandmates in both groups took different approaches with their artistic freedom. While the Beatles all individually maintained success in their respective solo careers, each member crafted a vastly different sound. See John Lennon's work with the Plastic Ono Band compared to Ringo Starr's album, Look Up. In between the Walker Brothers' two main stints across 12 years, Scott made time for his solo career and released his first self-titled album in honor of his forename. This would mark the start of a journey like no other. The reverence that Swedish director Ingmar Bergman holds in the film community is unparalleled. Having directed around 20 films in the first 15 years of his career, he developed a repertoire for engaging with the parts of the human psyche through a myriad of subjects. Asking a Bergman fan for their favorite film of his is a daunting task. His output, especially starting in the mid-50s through the 80s, consists of acclaimed work after acclaimed work. For the sake of brevity, we will focus on his foray into the soul-stirring, where his reckoning with the concept of faith is at its most direct. Released in 1957, The Seventh Seal is considered a classic in the world cinema canon. The story is centered upon a Swedish knight named Antonius Block, who upon returning to the ravages of the Black Death, encounters the physical personification of death. Block challenges death to a game of chess in order to prolong his life. Multiple Bergman regulars star in the film, most notably Max von Sydow, Gunnar Björnstrand, and Bibi Andersson. 12 years passed by in between the release of the film and Scott 4, the final installment in Scott Walker's numbered tetralogy of solo albums and the only one of the series released under his birth name, Engel. A facet of Walker's early solo work that I find to be especially fascinating is his ability to shift emotion in vocal performances against an undercurrent of melancholy. It would be easy for a vocalist of his caliber to overpower the subtlety of the background instrumentation, especially when juxtaposed against the dramatic gravitas of the Baroque pop genre. Plastic Palace People and It's Raining Today from Scott 2 and Scott 3 respectively both wield a dynamic quality of kaleidoscopic emotion from verse to verse. I've never been able to shake the feeling of dread that pervades the shrill, screeching drone in the latter song. Walker's inclination toward the avant-garde is established at this point in his career, while Bergman's affinity toward the spiritual begins to take its strongest form. The opening track of Scott 4 sports the same title as the film and perhaps features the record's most literal lyricism, delivered with a lush sense of development through gallant, suave strings. Taking abundant inspiration from art house cinema and existentialist philosophy, many cite the 1969 project as the inception of Walker's reinvention as an artist. Anybody seen a knight pass this way? I saw him playing chess with death yesterday. His crusade was a search for God, and they say, it's been a long way to carry on. A knight named Antonius Block embarks on his journey accompanied by his squire Jöns, experiencing the absence of divinity in the face of peril. The progressive prefix to the pop genre earns its keep here. An atmospheric quality is achieved through medieval fanfare, conjuring a sense of triumph. We shift perspectives with ease while listening to each verse, akin to how Bergman wields artistic iconography and symbolism in The Seventh Seal without resorting to visual abstraction. Sentient beings are rendered obsolete against the force of the waves, where the rocks themselves are seemingly indistinguishable from skulls. It's as simple as it seems. The sun falls on the horizon, signifying the coming of death. For as long as the knight plays, he will continue to live. Block dedicates his life to God and is met with nothing except the self-determination to carry on. Anybody hear of plague in this town? The town I've left behind was burned to the ground. A young girl on a stake, her face framed in flames, cried, I'm not a witch, God knows my name. The night he watched with fear, he needed to know. He ran where he might feel God's breath, and in the misty church he knelt to confess. The face within the booth was Mr. Death. Walker assumes the role of a third-person narrator in between lines of dialogue, commanding a steady rise of intensity. While bleakness in all its forms manifested in Bergman's work often, there's an untamed perseverance that Block maintains. The ordinary scenes arouse a feeling of deception, contributing to a brewing mistrust. This is subliminally alluded to in the song by the exclusion of the caravan scene where Joff receives a vision of the Virgin Mary. His wife, Mia, rebukes the validity of what he describes as a literal sensation. However, Block's quest for the tangible divine remains unfounded in reality, for he desires not faith or conjecture, but knowledge. Revelations are made not through a complex narrative, but summoned through the introspective dialogue and patience on close-ups. The songwriting possesses a similar sentiment, operating with realist succinctness. My life's a vain pursuit of meaningless miles. Why can't God touch me with a sign? Perhaps there's no one there, answered the booth, and Death hid within his cloak and smiled. This morning I played chess with Death, said the knight. We played that he might grant me time. My bishop and my knight will shatter his flanks, and I still might feel God's heart in mine. Faith cannot exist without doubt, for its cessation renders the very concept itself obsolete. Block's entire life is dedicated to the pursuit of what he deems noble, yet God remains silent. He cannot bear a life of mediocrity and is willing to divulge his strategy to a priest whose identity remains temporarily unclear. Chimes ring out, the pervasive bravado rises in Walker's voice. The lyrical prowess on display describes the idea of a mortal confiding in another being whom he believes to be mortal, only to reveal himself as omniscient through the playful rejection of an immortal opposing force. Bergman develops this concept further in the film by converging Jones's apparent heroic act by saving the servant girl from being raped by Raval, only to romantically pursue her himself. Upon her immediate rejection, he coerces her into becoming his servant. The absence of God is equivalent to the failure to punish wrongdoing. Block is nowhere to be seen while these events unfold. Yoff is forced into a humiliation ritual by the townsfolk, led by Raval, and is eventually saved by Jones. Justice is bound to the whims of personal morality, for laws hold no weight in this society. When the priest reveals himself as Death, no one is there to stop him from carrying out Block's sentence. The woman on the stake is condemned to die as a punishment for engaging in sexual relations with the devil, and Block believes intervening at this point is futile. The plague, execution without trial, and divine reckoning all lead to death, regardless of whether he, himself the personification, chooses to act or not. Block's chess strategy aptly relies on the piece he shares the title with. Confined to a move preset, Death is no longer an opponent, but faith is. And through confession's grill, Death's laughter was heard. The knight cried, "No, you've cheated me. But still I'll find a way. We'll meet once again." And once again continue to play. They met within the woods, the knight, his squire, and friends. And Death said, "Now the game shall end." The final move was made. The knight hung his head and said, "You've won. I've nothing left to play." Bergman's work doesn't employ overt trickery like the films of Jean-Luc Godard, but it instead channels an elliptical sentiment through symbolic repetition. His command of the camera, writing prowess, and ability to glean experience from lived reality highlight his affinity toward the constant clash of humanity and the transcendent. Block's pure nobility is contrasted against Mia's naivete toward religion, Yoff's purity, and Jones's opportunistic way of life. It's easy to view death as an all-knowing force parallel to that of God, yet Block views the physical manifestation of death as proof of this very faith. Yoff's survival can be attributed to a sort of impenetrable mysticism, or evidence of the battle between coincidence or intervention. given that there is no way to corroborate the validity of his visions. However, when the group gathers in the woods, he is the only one who notices the impending doom that arrives with death. The knight's noble act comes to fruition, and he distracts Death from the others while posing questions. Death repeats himself and says, "I know nothing." Walker's traditional background as a songwriter and pop musician flourishes under the strong structure, which remains stagnant while breaking the typical verse-chorus structure in both vocal and instrumental form. His crooning reaches an intensity as the choir dances around the consistent string and cymbal sounds, resulting in the sonification of a world coming to a close. The minstrel filled with visions sang to his love, to look against the stormy sky, the knight his squire and friends, their hands held as one, solemnly danced toward the dawn, his hourglass in his hand, his scythe by his side. The master, Death, he leads them on. The rain will wash away the tears from their faces, and as the thunder cracked, they were gone. Bergman doesn't adhere to historical accuracy when it pertains to background detail. For instance, the timeline of Swedish history is inconsistent with the portrayal of flagellation, as well as the way the Crusades are referred to. These slight deviations from truth are representative of the Seventh Seal's evolutionary context in both artistic creation and modern interpretation. In Bergman's autobiography, The Magic Lantern, he explains how a play he wrote in the early 1950s, titled Wood Painting, eventually evolved into what is now the Seventh Seal. Wood painting, as an art form, is reliant on the coexistence of the surface's natural pattern, as well as the human's input. My disdain for the often repeated quote, "Good artists borrow, great artists steal," is derived from the rejection of artistic originality as a binary concept. Interpretation, inspiration, and application are building blocks for art itself, whether that be a product of another human or nature. The idealism within a theatrical performance, a religious scene painted inside of a church, and the depth of scripture are examined in literal, textual, and self-referential ways. Bergman's philosophy is rendered into a tableau vivant, contradictions and all. Block chooses an arduous way to live life, searching for answers beyond his comprehension, seeking knowledge from those already doomed. He is a composite of every person who has lived before, the film itself an amalgamation of every other art form. We are cogs in a cyclical machine of suffering, burdened by the weight of evolutionary fate. Walker's magical artistry comes from the death and rebirth of his past work, much like Block's quest to achieve meaning through a singular action to absolve humanity of its penchant for meaninglessness. The interpretive abstraction afforded to religious texts sparks contentious debate. Block's persistent adherence to divine moral dogma is rooted in a similar binary, one that his consciousness dooms him with. From our non-diegetic perspective, Death's role opposes the absence of the possibility of God, not his literal form. The challenge set forth to Death may provide Block with what he desires, since the chess match itself provides him with an answer. If this answer is granted before Death takes his toll, is the pursuit of knowledge itself a pathway to needless suffering? The dinner scene in Block's castle extends the same verse from the first shot. And when the Lamb had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Revelations 8:1. The book of Revelation is the final book of the New Testament, where nature in its earthly form purges itself of its mode of being. The aforementioned verse is key in its allegorical context, and directly comes into play regarding my interpretation of the passage in relation to the end of the film. Block's confrontation with Death results in the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, where the group's presence is the only divide between the soil of the earth and the boundlessness of the sky. This dance is the answer itself, a limbo where life and death coexist, and meaning is revealed. Block and his companions go where all who have passed are now. This period of peace is either marred or made peaceful by God's silence, the point where life ceases or a new journey begins. This state of half-consciousness will provide an answer, but this finality, which everyone shares, can never be shared. In the end, Block's community is all that remains of him, where the memory and vision are possibly the same after all. Were Yoff and his family saved by Block, God, or nature? Is the answer in faith alone, even if one cannot comprehend it. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21:4. The choir remains until the instruments fade. I don't believe the audience can decipher the true meaning of Block and his crew's fate through a textual analysis, yet Bergman provides us with ample ability to do so. It is in this attempt that we call upon knowledge, where we draw from our own philosophical inclination, the present's relationship to the past, and the nature of art to find the answer to the questions we pose. Our faith exists only in the present, infallibly imprisoned by the prospect of eternity. This state of the divine exists only in our capacity to comprehend sensory experiences through an incarnate perspective. If this question is answered, either nature or humanity will cease to exist as we know it. In the 1970s, Scott Walker released a myriad of solo albums under heavy studio supervision while reuniting with the Walker brothers from 1975 to 1978. Climate of Hunter, his only project of the 1980s, would serve as the ultimate transition piece into the deep avant-garde. Tilt, The Drift, and Bish Bosh delve into a newfound eeriness, engaging with dead political figures, meat-punching, and even a demonic Donald Duck impression. No words will do these three records justice. His last non-soundtrack work, Soused, is a collaboration with the drone metal stalwart band, Sun. He scored 3 films, 2 for Brady Corbett, The Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux, and 1 for Leos Carax, Pola X. Walker's 4 final albums would be my go-to recommendations if asked about works that illustrate the concept of medium specificity in music. They are spectacular in their singular approach and unrelentingly complex. He passed away from cancer in 2019. Ingmar Bergman continued to make films with an experimental touch. The brilliant Wild Strawberries was also released in 1957. His future collaborations with cinematographer Sven Nykvist are all must-watches and delve further into similar questions raised at the beginning of his career and in this film. In my humble opinion, Scott 4 is one of the finest albums ever made, and both Walker and Bergman's renditions of The Seventh Seal deserve your attention. This won't be the last time we discuss them on the channel. If you'd like to support my work, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. My Patreon is in the description for those who wish to fund future videos with their generosity. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate it.